The sun had just begun to slide below the jagged ridges of the Arizona mountains, painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson. The air smelled of dust, pine, and the faint smoke of a distant campfire. Jonathan Hale, a young rancher barely 24, rode his horse along the edge of his family's grazing land. His father had passed 2 winters ago, leaving him with acres of land, a small herd of cattle, and the heavy burden of keeping his family's name alive. He was quiet by nature, the sort of man who spoke less and worked more, but deep inside he carried the weight of loneliness like a shadow he couldn't shake. It was during one of those lonely evening rides that fate dealt him an unexpected hand. In the fading light, he noticed movement near the creek that ran along the border of his ranch. At first, he thought it might be a wild animal, but as he drew closer, he realized it was a girl, barely more than 16 or 17, her long black hair glistening under the twilight. She was dressed in Apache buckskin, and her dark eyes flashed like embers when she spotted him. Before he could speak, she bolted. Startled, Jonathan instinctively urged his horse forward, cutting her off near the water. The girl stumbled, and before she could flee again, Jonathan dismounted and caught her arm. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quickly, though his firm grip betrayed his own nervousness. She didn't understand his words, at least not fully, but the tension in her body told him she expected the worst. In the silence of that moment, Jonathan realized what he had done. He had captured an Apache girl, a dangerous mistake in a land where misunderstandings between settlers and Apache tribes often ended in bloodshed. His heart pounded in his chest as he looked into her terrified eyes. He should have let her go. He knew it. But something deep inside told him this was no ordinary encounter. Jonathan led her back to his ranch, not dragging her but guiding her gently, speaking softly as though his tone alone could bridge the chasm between their worlds. His mother, a widow of quiet strength, gasped when she saw the girl. "Jonathan Hale," she whispered sharply, "what have you done? Do you realize what this could mean?" Jonathan nodded. He knew too well. If the Apache believed he had harmed or kidnapped one of their daughters, retribution could fall swift and merciless. But as his mother looked closer at the girl, she noticed the bruises on her arms, the dirt smeared on her face, and the way she trembled, not with anger, but with exhaustion and hunger. Against every sensible instinct, they chose not to send her away that night. Instead, Jonathan offered her food, placing bread and venison on the wooden table. At first, she refused, eyeing it with suspicion, but hunger overcame fear. Slowly, she ate, every bite measured, her eyes never leaving her captors. Jonathan didn't know her name, so he called her, Little Star, after the single bright star that pierced the dusk outside the window. The name seemed to soften her gaze for just a moment, as though she recognized in him something other than an enemy. Days turned into weeks. Jonathan expected her tribe to come searching, but no one came. Through gestures, she eventually made him understand. She was not merely lost, she had been cast out. A rival group had raided her camp, scattering her people. In the chaos, she had been left behind, and now she had no family, no tribe, and no place to return to. Jonathan's mother, moved by the girl's silent sorrow, insisted they give her shelter until a safer path revealed itself. What shocked the village, however, was not that Jonathan had brought home an Apache girl, it was what she began to do. Instead of fleeing at the first chance, Little Star stayed. She rose before dawn, helping with chores she had never known before. She tended the cattle, carried water, and even mended fences with surprising strength for her small frame. She worked alongside Jonathan without complaint, her quiet determination speaking volumes. One evening, when a sudden storm swept across the valley, lightning spooked the cattle, sending them stampeding toward the ravine. Jonathan ran into the night to turn them back, but the ground was slick, and his horse stumbled. Before disaster struck, Little Star appeared from the shadows, waving a burning torch she had lit from the hearth. She shouted in her native tongue, her voice rising like a command from the heavens. To Jonathan's astonishment, the animals slowed, circling back away from the cliff. By the time the storm passed, not a single cow was lost. Word spread quickly. The villagers, who had once eyed her with suspicion, began to whisper of the Apache girl who had saved a rancher's herd. Children watched her in awe, and women quietly admired her resilience. Yet there were still those who doubted, who warned Jonathan that kindness toward her could bring ruin. Jonathan listened but could not ignore what his own heart told him. This girl was not a threat, she was a gift. The true test came when sickness struck the village. A fever swept through, taking children first, then elders. Fear gripped every household. The small doctor's shack overflowed, remedies ran dry, and hope seemed as fragile as the brittle autumn leaves. Jonathan's own little sister, Mary, fell ill, her skin burning with fever. His mother wept, fearing another grave on their hill. Then, little Star stepped forward. She vanished into the hills for 2 days, returning with bundles of herbs and roots. With hands steady and eyes fierce, she brewed teas and poultices, whispering prayers in her tongue. Against all odds, Mary's fever broke within the week. Others followed her instructions, and slowly, the tide of sickness turned. The village was stunned. The girl they had feared, the outsider they had distrusted, had become their savior. For the first time, they looked at her not as an Apache, not as a stranger, but as one of their own. Jonathan felt a change within himself too. Watching her care for his sister, watching her pour her soul into healing those who once rejected her, he realized he was no longer bound to her by accident or duty. He was bound by something deeper, something he dared not name aloud but felt in every heartbeat. Months later, when her tribe finally found her trail and warriors rode into the valley, the village braced for conflict. But what unfolded shocked everyone once again. Instead of hostility, there was peace. The Apache chief, weary and weathered, listened as the villagers told how the girl had saved them. He watched as children clung to her skirts, refusing to let go. He saw the way Jonathan stood beside her, not as a captor, but as a protector, perhaps even more. The chief's eyes softened, and he said only, "She has found her place." And so, the girl who had once been captured by accident was no longer a prisoner of fate. She was family. She was hope. She was proof that compassion could bridge even the widest divides. Jonathan often thought back to that evening by the creek when he had grabbed her arm. He realized now that it wasn't capture at all, it was rescue, for both of them. She had given him more than he had ever given her. Courage, healing, and a future that carried the promise of unity. The story of Little Star spread far beyond their valley, told and retold as a testament to humanity's power to rise above fear and mistrust. It reminded people that kindness, even in the most unlikely circumstances, could change the course of lives, and perhaps even history itself. In the end, what she did shocked the whole village, but even more, it healed them. And long after, when the stars filled the night sky, Jonathan would point to the brightest one and whisper, "Little Star." For he knew it was compassion, not conquest, that lit the path forward.